Welcome to episode 90 of your CySA Plus Prepcast. Today we'll take a focused look at the core risk management principles that guide effective vulnerability response in cybersecurity. When organizations are faced with unpatched systems, exposed configurations, or exploitable software components, risk management frameworks help security teams make structured decisions about what to remediate, what to mitigate, and what level of risk, if any, is acceptable. Understanding how to apply strategies like risk acceptance, risk transfer, risk avoidance, and risk mitigation empowers analysts to make sound judgments, align actions with business priorities, and communicate risk in ways that leadership understands. These principles are essential to real-world cybersecurity success and directly support your preparation for the CySA Plus exam. Let's begin with a broad definition. Risk management in cybersecurity is the systematic process of identifying, assessing, prioritizing, and responding to risks in order to minimize their impact on organizational assets, operations, and reputation. Within the context of vulnerability response, it becomes a practical framework for determining how to deal with known security weaknesses. Whether those weaknesses stem from unpatched systems, misconfigured services, outdated components, or third-party dependencies. Risk management is not a one-time activity. It is a continuous process of balancing threats, operational realities, and risk tolerance in order to maintain secure and resilient environments. Organizations generally rely on four primary strategies when responding to risks associated with known vulnerabilities: risk acceptance, risk transfer, risk avoidance, and risk mitigation. These strategies provide different pathways to managing risk depending on available resources, system criticality, business constraints, and the severity of the vulnerability. Analysts must understand each strategy not only conceptually but also in practical terms, how it applies to different systems, how it is documented, and how it aligns with broader enterprise risk frameworks. Choosing the right approach requires analysis, communication, and operational discipline. Risk acceptance is the decision to acknowledge a known vulnerability and proceed without taking further action to remediate it. This strategy is usually reserved for situations where the cost or impact of fixing the vulnerability outweighs the potential risk, or where the risk itself falls within the organization's defined risk tolerance. For example, a non-critical system with a low-severity vulnerability may be left unpatched for a period if patching it introduces downtime or breaks functionality. In these cases, the risk is formally documented, reviewed, and approved, usually with input from business leaders and under continuous monitoring for any changes in the threat landscape. Risk transfer involves shifting some portion of the risk to a third party. This can be accomplished through cyber insurance policies that offer financial protection against losses resulting from security incidents. It also includes contractual agreements with managed service providers or vendors who take on responsibility for system maintenance, security operations, or compliance. When using this strategy, organizations must carefully review service-level agreements and insurance coverage details to ensure that they are transferring risk effectively and that there are clear responsibilities defined for handling vulnerabilities, incidents, and breaches. Risk avoidance takes a different approach by seeking to eliminate the risk altogether. Rather than accepting or transferring the risk, the organization chooses not to engage in the risky activity. In vulnerability response, this might involve decommissioning an insecure system, disabling a vulnerable service, retiring unsupported software, or redesigning a business process that introduces exposure. This strategy is often used when the vulnerability is unmanageable, through patching, or when the presence of the system presents an unacceptable risk to high-value assets. While avoidance can be costly in terms of time or resources, it is sometimes the only way to remove the risk entirely. Risk mitigation is the most commonly applied strategy. It involves reducing the likelihood or impact of exploitation by implementing controls and safeguards. In practical terms, this includes applying patches, updating configurations, deploying endpoint protection, enhancing logging and monitoring, segmenting networks, and applying compensating controls where full remediation is not possible. Mitigation strategies are tailored to the specific threat, system architecture, and organizational priorities. Analysts work across teams to ensure that mitigations are applied effectively and verified through testing and validation. To apply these strategies effectively, organizations rely on formal risk assessment methodologies. Risk assessments examine the severity of the vulnerability, the likelihood of exploitation, the sensitivity of the affected asset, the effectiveness of existing controls, and the potential business impact if the vulnerability is exploited. These assessments result in a risk score or ranking that helps decision-makers prioritize vulnerabilities and select appropriate response strategies. Analysts must be skilled at conducting and interpreting these assessments and at presenting findings in a format that supports executive decision-making. Vulnerability prioritization is a critical part of risk management. Not all vulnerabilities require the same level of attention or urgency. Analysts must evaluate which vulnerabilities are most likely to be targeted based on the existence of public exploits, active scanning campaigns, threat actor interest, and industry trends. Systems that are internet-facing, connected to sensitive data, or involved in critical business functions are given priority. Effective prioritization allows organizations to focus resources where they will have the most meaningful impact on risk reduction. Documentation is a non-negotiable aspect of every risk management decision. Organizations must formally record which vulnerabilities have been accepted, transferred, mitigated, or avoided, along with the rationale, approval chain, and supporting evidence. This documentation provides transparency, supports regulatory compliance, and enables meaningful analysis of past decisions during audits or incident investigations. Analysts are responsible for ensuring that documentation is complete, accurate, and aligned with broader cybersecurity governance processes. Finally, risk management is not static. Continuous monitoring and periodic review are necessary to ensure that decisions remain valid over time. A vulnerability that was accepted last quarter may now be actively exploited. A compensating control may no longer be effective due to system changes. A vendor's service level agreement may be renegotiated, altering the risk transfer profile. Analysts must regularly reassess vulnerabilities, review response strategies, and incorporate lessons learned from incidents and security assessments to keep the organization's risk posture current and responsive to emerging threats. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are more security courses on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Applying risk management principles effectively requires well-defined operational procedures, clear governance, and consistent collaboration across teams. For risk acceptance, organizations must ensure that every accepted vulnerability is accompanied by formal documentation and executive-level approval. This documentation should include the asset involved, the vulnerability identifier, the justification for accepting the risk, compensating controls in place, any monitoring activities implemented, and a timeline for review. Risk acceptance is never a permanent decision. It must be revisited regularly to determine whether the risk has changed or if remediation has become feasible. Risk transfer strategies must be implemented with precision and careful contractual planning. When working with third parties such as managed service providers or cloud hosting vendors, organizations must establish clear security responsibilities within service-level agreements. These agreements must define who is accountable for identifying, reporting, and remediating vulnerabilities. Additionally, cyber insurance policies must be scrutinized to ensure they cover the types of incidents the organization is most likely to encounter. Analysts work with procurement, legal teams, and executive leadership to ensure that risk transfer mechanisms are clearly understood and effectively enforced. Risk avoidance strategies often require significant operational or architectural changes. For instance, if a system cannot be secured and is no longer necessary to core business functions, decommissioning it may be the most responsible action. Similarly, if a business process depends on software that is no longer supported or inherently insecure, the organization may need to redesign workflows, implement newer platforms, or migrate to more secure cloud-based services. These decisions require collaboration across IT, business, and compliance teams to balance security needs with business continuity. Risk mitigation remains the most common and practical strategy for day-to-day vulnerability response. It encompasses a wide variety of technical and administrative actions aimed at reducing the likelihood or impact of an exploit. Mitigation might include rapid patch deployment, system reconfiguration, deployment of endpoint detection tools, enhanced logging, user behavior analytics, or stronger access control mechanisms. Analysts are responsible for ensuring that mitigation efforts are executed promptly and tracked to completion. Mitigation is often an iterative process involving planning, testing, implementation, and follow-up validation. Risk assessments must be integrated into the organization's broader cybersecurity and risk management programs. They serve as the foundation for policy development, control implementation, incident response planning, and budget allocation. For example, vulnerabilities that consistently score high on risk assessments may justify increased investment in automation tools, network segmentation solutions, or third-party risk monitoring. Analysts ensure that vulnerability risk assessments are not treated in isolation, but rather as inputs into larger risk governance efforts that shape organizational resilience. Communication is a vital component of successful risk management. Security teams must clearly articulate risk decisions to system owners, business units, executive leadership, and compliance officers. Whether a vulnerability is being accepted, transferred, mitigated, or avoided, the rationale must be understood by all affected parties. This transparency not only ensures alignment, but also builds trust across the organization. It ensures that leadership is not blindsided by risks that were quietly accepted or transferred without proper consideration. Analysts use dashboards, reports, briefings, and risk registers to maintain this visibility. Continuous improvement in risk management is driven by regular evaluations of how vulnerabilities were handled in past scenarios. Post-incident reviews, audit findings, red team exercises, and retrospective analyses all provide insights into what worked and what did not. Did accepted risks result in compromise? Were transferred risks fully covered by the provider or insurer? Did mitigation efforts actually reduce risk or simply shift it elsewhere? These evaluations allow analysts to refine their processes, update response playbooks, and enhance the maturity of the risk management program over time. Threat intelligence adds a dynamic dimension to vulnerability risk management. Analysts use real-time threat feeds, industry-specific advisories, and public exploit databases to determine whether a vulnerability is actively being targeted. This information directly influences the choice of risk strategy. A vulnerability that was previously accepted may need to be reclassified for urgent mitigation if a new exploit is released. Similarly, knowing that a managed provider has seen attacks against a shared platform may prompt reassessment of transferred risks. Threat intelligence allows organizations to stay ahead of evolving attack vectors. Compliance reporting must reflect the organization's risk management activities accurately. Regulatory frameworks such as PCI DSS, HIPAA, and ISO 27001 require organizations to document how vulnerabilities are discovered, assessed, and addressed. Auditors will expect to see detailed records of accepted risks, mitigation timelines, avoidance decisions, and transfer agreements. Analysts ensure that reporting is consistent, thorough, and aligned with compliance expectations. Documentation supports both internal accountability and external validation of the organization's security posture. Ongoing training ensures that all stakeholders understand how to apply risk management principles to vulnerability response. Analysts, system administrators, developers, and even executive leaders should be familiar with how vulnerabilities are assessed, what constitutes acceptable risk, and how response strategies are implemented. Training programs should include scenario-based learning, tabletop exercises, and updates on changing regulatory requirements. This shared understanding strengthens the organization's ability to respond effectively, prioritize correctly, and communicate risk clearly at all levels. To conclude Episode 90 East, Mastering Risk Management Principles, acceptance, transfer, avoidance, and mitigation is essential to managing cybersecurity vulnerabilities effectively. These strategies enable analysts to make informed, defensible decisions that align with business goals, regulatory obligations, and evolving threat landscapes. A mature risk management process includes formal assessments, strategic prioritization, detailed documentation, continuous monitoring, threat-informed updates, and organization-wide communication. These principles not only support your CySA Plus exam readiness, but also elevate your role as a cybersecurity analyst capable of shaping risk-aware, secure enterprise environments. Thanks for listening. To learn more about cybersecurity, please visit baremetalcyber.com. There you will find best-selling books, videos, and even more free cybersecurity training courses. Please subscribe to the Prepcast and our various podcasts. And thanks for listening.